It's a beautiful, sunny, fairly cool day today. But there's a special date today, and it's Christmas. It's December 25th. And so today I'd like to make for you my homemade spaghetti sauce that I grew up making all the time, every week in our Italian home. Of course, I learned it from my mom, and so what I'm going to do today is just show you the basics, the beginning of how we go about making my homemade Italian sauce by starting to warm up my big pan. I've got a big saucepan here, and I'm going to put a good amount of olive oil, and I like to use the extra virgin olive oil. And over here, I started cutting up. I have Italian sausage that I bought from my butcher. It's delicious. It's worth looking around for some really good quality Italian sausage. You could use pork. I have chosen, for health reasons and taste as well, to buy Italian sausage that is poultry. And this dark one here colored is the hot Italian sausage. And over here, we've got the mild, and you could see the difference in color because of spices. And what I did is I took each link and I cut it up into thirds. The reason why I cut into thirds, because this is a pretty good sized sausage link. Sometimes they're a little smaller. If you want, you can just cut them in half. Do whatever you feel like doing. It doesn't really matter. So this is our Italian sausage that we are going to start browning in my hot oil saucepan. And I also cooked up about 2.5, these are my nice red onions, and I cut those up, and they were probably, probably a large size, 2.5 cups, or onions, I'm sorry. It's probably more than 2.5 cups. So what we're going to do is take our board over here, and our oil is getting hot. Yep, let's see. You want to make sure the whole bottom of the pan is coated nicely. And I'm just going to start laying in, well, it's not quite up to snuff yet, but it's sizzling a little bit. There you go. The hotter you can get it, the better it is. I've got it on a little under my high temperature. And we're going to just, well, you can see I just laid them in the pot. And we're going to just let that sizzle a little bit there. And you're not, be careful, because they do want to talk back to you. And I poured a good amount of oil in here only because I'm using chicken sausage, which is not very greasy. The other nice thing that I always add is a few leaves of bay leaves. Here we're going to put 1, 2, 3. And that gives it a nice flavor. All right. So we're going to just let this continue to cook around 5 minutes. Give it a couple minutes on this side. Then we're going to just kind of turn them over, let it go another 2, 3 minutes, and we'll be on to our next step. There we go. You can hear it sizzling away. I've lowered the temperature just a hair because, you really want to keep this on a pretty high heat. Not high enough to burn it and splash everywhere, but enough where you get that sizzle and you can actually move the sausage. It's not sticking. So now we're going to just up the heat a hair, and we're going to go and add my 2.5 red onions. I use red. I don't know if it's the color, but I think it's because they're a lot sweeter, so I'm told. So I am going to go and put this whole bowl, and it looks like an enormous amount of onions, but it sweetens my sauce. And we're just going to stir that around because you still got it up pretty high just because we're adding the cold onions, and we're also going to add about 3/4 cup of my Cabernet Sauvignon. There, you hear how that kind of cooled down? So we're gonna bring it back up again to temperature, because what we're gonna do now is simmer our 3 bay leaves, our chicken sausage in olive oil that was fried, and 2½ onions. We are gonna put the cover on this and simmer it for 1 hour. I've got my 2 pounds of ground beef I bought the other day from my butcher. And to that, I'm gonna start out, I like to make my wet mixture first. I'm gonna put 2 eggs in the bowl because I wanna make my meatballs. And what's nice to do is to make them ahead of time. Like I say, we've got a whole hour there, and we can season these nicely and let them sit, because then the flavor can go more deeply into your meat even before it gets into the pot of sauce. So I am going to add my black pepper. Again, keep in mind we have 2 pounds of ground beef. Put my salt. I like onion powder. This is a very powdery onion powder. And I'm going to add my parsley flakes. Crush it up in the palm of your hands. Well, let's see, we're going to start out with 1 handful of that. Now my oregano. I like oregano. I believe oregano adds a very nice spice to my sauce. I didn't grow up. My mom had something against oregano. She just used basil all the time. If she made pizza, then she'd put the oregano. But when she made spaghetti sauce, never would she put oregano. But I like it, so I put it in. And I usually put maybe 2 to 1 basil and oregano. And I'm telling you, the key to the meatballs for me is basil. And I really, really like to smell the basil smell in my meat. So I might be adding some more later. I go by smell. Now we've got some wonderful grated Pecorino Romano cheese that I get from my deli, local deli. And there's a big chunk of cheese for me later. Don't let those go to waste. Eat them right up. Boy, my kids, oh, I would buy it by the chunk. I'd cut the pieces. We'd have half a chunk gone before I could even grate the cheese to be used, because the kids loved it. And of course, when their papi, my father, they'd be over his house, and he'd be grating the cheese, and he'd say, okay, who wants the chunk? And of course, whoever got to the kitchen first got the chunks from when my father would grate the Pecorino Romano cheese. He would buy the big, big blocks. All my kids can remember that about their papi. So now I'm going to stick in my 2 pounds. And I'm going to just kind of mesh this all together. And you know, sometimes I add breadcrumbs and sometimes I don't. And I'm going to put, I got a 1/4 cup measure here. I think just a 1/4 cup of our panko breadcrumbs. Okay. Hands in there and stir it all together. And then you kind of give it the smell test, and I smell a good amount of herbs in there. I added a little bit more Parmesan cheese, or Pecorino Romano cheese, and a little bit more basil. So now I'm going to, little secret here, little dash of cup of water, and it just kind of wet your hands a little bit, and then just start making your meatballs. Just kind of make them all different sizes. If you want to make some bigger, you can. And get them all pre-made. Stick it back in your refrigerator till the hour is up after we've simmered our sausage and onions here. There, and we'll just keep going and making your meatballs. All right, this has been This has been about 1 hour of simmering. Okay, we've been letting this sausage and onions simmer here for about 45 minutes. You could see how those onions are just so small and just kind of melted away here. And the size of the sausages are perfect. They're like meatball sizes. So what we're going to do now, what I like to do is add my herbs before I put my sauce in. So I'm going to put my basil. I'm just going to crush that in. And I'm going to put my burner up a little bit because we will soon be adding our sauce. I like to crush the herbs. And I'd like to put enough of the basil flavor in. About 3 handfuls of that. So maybe 1.5 of our oregano. It's kind of the ratio that I like. And we'll throw in a little bit of parsley, handful of parsley. And just stir that around. And don't forget, we have our 3 bay leaves still in there, which at the very end, you will want to take out so nobody gets that on their plate. There we go. Now we're just going to let that just kind of come together. And I've got my 3 cans here. I've got 2 cans of crushed tomatoes. I have 1 can of puree. You can hear that now. It's all bubbly and nice. I'm going to dump in the 1 can of puree because I've got 3 other cans of tomato sauce, this crushed tomato and puree. So we're going to put in a 16-ounce can of tomato paste. And that will help to thicken our sauce. We're going to put just a wee bit of water, maybe a half a can, your pepper and salt. And then I add one other famous ingredient that we like to use. I don't know if this is a Mediterranean thing, but we put a couple dashes of cinnamon. 25 meatballs that I kept in my refrigerator. We did that earlier. And once this starts to come to boil, which will be shortly, we will start dropping our meatballs in. If you can hear it. So what we're going to do now is just take our meatballs, and wherever you see a rolling boil, just drop them in one at a time, being careful. And you want to keep it up on high because this is going to cool down the sauce. Now you have to stir carefully because sauce burns so quickly. And you do not want to have your sauce burn. So at the very beginning stages, you want to put your cover on with it off just a little bit. And you want to lower the temperature. You're probably going to stir it a lot more in the beginning, just so that it doesn't burn, until you have been able to let it come to a real safe simmer. Then you can probably stir it every 10-15 minutes and it should be fine. There. Okay, our sauce has been simmering for a good hour and a half. Remember, after the initial hour with the onions and the sausage, and remember I put some Cabernet Sauvignon at the beginning? Well, at the end of my sauce, I always like to douse it with a good amount, maybe a half a cup, of some more of the Cabernet Sauvignon. Look at that wonderful, awesome sauce. Look at the nice color. Little bit of chunks of tomatoes in there. Smells wonderful. Today, I hope you all made some good, memorable memories that you won't ever forget. And yeah, it's around food. And if you'd like any of my recipes, just go to my website at memorableFoodDishes.com. Enjoy.